All right, it's time for our closer look story. And yeah, it's fun. You may be a proponent of messaging privacy. I know I am. And this week has been kind of big for that. There was a news story that broke on Monday that the editor in chief for the Atlantic magazine was accidentally added to a signal group where members of the U.S. government were talking about highly classified U.S. military actions. The report kicked off a firestorm of congressional hearings, which are, of course, still ongoing, about the nature of data sharing and privacy, not only for government officials, but for members of the defense and intelligence community. And of course, it has also raised questions about the way that those same officials will often circumvent policy to facilitate those communications. Now, the nature of the group and their discussion topic is really political. Let's not focus on that part. Let's focus on the communications aspect. Why did they decide to use Signal? How can we be sure that it really is safe? And what does this mean for government agencies that are still clamoring to create backdoors into these protocols so that anybody can get in there and read whatever they want, whenever they want? Al, I know you're not from the US, but I'm pretty sure this made the news in New Zealand. Hit me, man. What do you think?
Oh man, we like seeing all of the crazy news coming out of the United States just as much as you like seeing it happening in your own country. One of the nice things in this, I think, is that Signal is actually a really good secure tool. And it's also developed by a company and a foundation that are US based. So both the Signal LLC and the Signal Foundation are US based. And so the terror that this might all be going on over a Chinese owned or an aggressor state owned platform is less of a concern. In terms of information security for transfers across Signal, one of the principles of Signal is that the platform itself doesn't hold the decryption keys for the data that's being transferred across it. So the encryption is handled between the individual endpoints, so the people who are members of the same Signal group are handling their encryption. And so Signal as a platform can't read the data. That's a good thing. It means that the data that's in transit and in transfer is secured, provided, of course, there's no backdoor that's been injected into the open source code for Signal. So government agencies wanted weakened encryption so that they could read other people's data. Interesting that the choice was to use Signal here. You also hit on a really important question about why the heck are they using this open source tool and platform? Surely this defense communication that's about ongoing operational activity should be on a DoD secured environment. From the very limited exposure I've had to military comms and security, the sorts of things I was hearing on here are definitely not unclassified. They're definitely classified, secret, or above. This was definitely operational details that were being shared. And that sort of information should be on DoD secured networks. I know when our Defence Force here in New Zealand communicates with DoD, there is significant amounts of effort put into making sure that the systems are secure and isolated so that you can't accidentally add some external third party to an operational communication. But it does seem that a bunch of this communication was not initiated by people who were actually in that deep in that defense kind of space. And this is the challenge around having political control in operational components, is that there is a discontinuity between the life experience of somebody in politics and the life experience of somebody who's working in defense and defense communications. And so that tendency to not have the ingrained necessity, that feeling of ingrained necessity that we use the tools that match the security of the information we're conveying, just isn't necessarily there for elected officials and people are a little more tangential to military operations. So the tendency to then go shadow IT. Let's use a convenient tool that we can easily communicate with rather than having to go through all of the clearances required, getting cleared devices, carrying a different device to connect to the secure network. Let's not have that get in the way of sharing information. There's always that tension time, isn't there, between open communication within a tool and flexibility and then the control that's required to do this securely and match operational requirements.
I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was this huge flap back in 2009 about the president carrying a BlackBerry. And everyone was flipping out about it because they're like, oh my God, it's an insecure device. And eventually it got to the point where they were able to secure it. And that would allow the president to continue to receive email updates and things like that. And like it was a huge, huge deal to the point that when his successor took over in office and obviously seemed to prefer an iPhone, they didn't have a way to harden an iPhone and they weren't actually sure how that was going to work. So you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the fact that there is a completely different communications infrastructure for secured data. Like the devices, they have to go through rigorous testing, right? And they don't have access to app stores. They don't have access to things that could potentially compromise them. Here's another thing that you can't do: you can't sideload anything. So the fact that Signal was used for this communication means we know they weren't using their approved electronic devices. What they were using was their personal electronic devices. I don't know about how it works in other parts of the world, but possessing classified information on a non-secured device, I believe, is a crime. So we know that they were doing something they weren't supposed to. This is the one thing we know they were doing that they weren't supposed to, because the other thing that those devices allow you to do is only create chats or groups with people that have proven that they are on a secured device. Right now, here's the deal: I trust Signal more than just about anything else out there because of all the reasons that you listed off about how it's an end-to-end encrypted model. I can get notified whenever the device changes, when the safety number changes, all that other stuff. It's everything you would want in an encrypted secure communications protocol, not the least of which is that nobody really has the ability to get in and get that stuff. Could you imagine what would have happened if someone had backdoored the Secretary of Defense's phone or possibly the National Security Advisor's phone and they got access to all of those encrypted chats? Because let's be honest, they're not putting one of these on Telegram and one of these on Signal and one of these on WhatsApp. They've picked one platform that accomplishes what they want to accomplish. And it goes around all of the other things that are going on, because there's another policy implication in here that a lot of people have to understand. It's the preservation of data. So when you communicate on a government device, all of the data that is communicated on said device is preserved for official records acts and things like freedom of information. Now, if the data is classified, you don't get to look at it unless you have the proper classification authority and need to know. So it's both, right? Like that is basics of security. If you take your CISSP, it's not just that it's top secret. You don't need to know what that data is, so you won't see it. But by going on personal devices and using an encrypted messaging system, you're basically kind of doing an end run around the policy of data retention, right? Which makes me wonder, what exactly are you sharing that you don't want people to know about? But this all gets like stirred up in this huge problem, which is we now live in a hyper-connected society where people expect to be able to have this. And something as simple as whether or not you are allowed to even see information drives people insane. Think about the number of times that we've heard about SCIFs, secure compartmentalized information facilities. They're basically floating rooms inside of a room that are electronically shielded, where you are allowed to go in and read things, whether they're on an electronic document like an iPad or a Kindle, or they're literal paper. But like, you can't even bring a phone into a SCIF. Like, it is not allowed at all. Here's another thing. A lot of those devices, like I know for a fact that the Nuclear Regulatory Agency has their own custom iPhone that doesn't have any cameras on it, because you're not allowed to bring an electronic camera anywhere near a nuclear reactor. So we can make devices that are highly secured. We can make sure that people are doing things on them that are secured. But that's not going to stop anybody from taking that and putting that phone down and texting their buddy and being like, hey, guess what I just found out? To the point where if you go ask one of your legal friends, especially if they're a lawyer who works for a state, local, or government agency, they have two phones. They have their work phone and they have their personal phone, and ne'er the twain shall meet. Because if you accidentally text a work thing on your personal phone, or if you get a personal text on your work phone, that means that in discovery, they can get both of them. And that becomes public record from that point forward. And that is a huge problem, because as we're going to find out, I am relatively certain that none of the people involved in this communication understood the legal ramifications of what they did, and it's about to hurt them a lot.